Hey, welcome back. I'm Joshua Trotter, and we are doing part two of Following God versus Following Man. So, today, the main passage that we're going to be in is Daniel chapter 3. Before, in part one, we learned about how Aaron, how he fell into peer pressure, and instead of following God, he followed man. He followed Israel, and he did things that he wasn't supposed to do. He broke the 10 Commandments. He didn't even take responsibility for it after. So we're going to see how some other people respond to following God versus following man. So in Daniel, it is way after the events in Exodus that we learned about with Aaron. So just to give you a quick rundown, what happened between Exodus and Daniel is that in Exodus, they're leaving Egypt. They're finally exiting Egypt, and they're on their way to the promised land. Through the leadership of Moses and then Joshua, they get to the promised land. They become a nation. Everything is fulfilling as God promised. They get their own land. They become a nation under God. The only thing is that they wanted to be like the other nations that were around them. They wanted to have a king rule over them instead of God. So God gave them King Saul. Now he reigned for 40 years. Then they had King David. He reigned for another 40 years. And then his son, King Solomon, came. Now, he was named Solomon because it literally means shalom or peace. He reigned for another 40 years, and they had succeeded like crazy. They had gold. They had peace with all their neighbors. There were no wars. Things were great. The only thing is, at the end of his life, he started to get into idol worship, or he allowed idol worship to come back into to Israel. Now, this ended up causing a great civil war between Jeroboam and Rehoboam. Now, when this civil war happened, the north separated. They became Israel, and the south called Judah. After this civil war, both end up getting back into idol worship instead of worshiping God. Now, when this happened, God removed his hand of protection from them. And eventually, Syria came and took over Israel to the north, and Babylon came and took over Judah to the south. Now, when Babylon took over, the king of Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar, took the people from Judah. He not only took them, but he relocated them to Babylon, and he needed people to serve before him. So he took the best of the people from Judah to serve him. Now, some of these best of the best are Daniel, and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These people have proved themselves to be, to have wisdom, they're blessed by God. And we're going to see how they respond to what happens next. So we're going to look at something that King Nebuchadnezzar does that goes directly against the 10 Commandments in verse 1 of chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar, the king, made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and its width 6 cubits. He had set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. So there's nothing wrong with that, right? He set up an image of gold. There's nothing wrong with just making something. But if we see later on, let's see what his intentions are for it. Verse 2, King Nebuchadnezzar sent word to gather the satraps, the administrators, the governors, the counselors, the treasurers and judges, the magistrates, and all the officials of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Still, nothing wrong. He got this image. He wants to celebrate it. Bring everyone, all the government officials. In verse 3, we see that they all came. In verse 4, a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O peoples, nations, and languages, that the time you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and psaltery, and in symphony, with all kinds of music, you shall fall down and worship the gold image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up." Now, whoa, time out. It's one thing to just create something, it's really cool. I made a statue, or an obelisk or whatever it was. But now he's saying you got to bow down and worship it. Now, we know what happened with Aaron in part 1, where that is a no-go. You're not supposed to do it. That's breaking the 10 Commandments. You're not supposed to make any image to worship, and definitely not supposed to actually go and worship it. So in verse 6, we'll see if there's any consequences. And whoever does not fall down and worship shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Now that sounds like peer pressure right there. It's not just that, hey, I want you to worship this golden image, but it's okay. If you don't worship this golden image, you're going in that fiery furnace. Now that's peer pressure right there. That's like your boss saying, hey, I want you to go ahead and, lie about this, write down something that didn't happen on this document. And, oh, you're not willing to do it? Well, then you're fired and we're going to sue you. So this is just a next level of peer pressure, or something that we go through, that something we're not supposed to do, but then there's consequences if we don't. So it builds a tension in us. So let's look and see how these young men respond to it. Now, in verse 7, it says that it actually happened. The horn, the flute, the harp, the lyre, and symphony, all kinds of music, it all played. And it said that the nations and languages fell down and worshiped the gold image which King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Now we understand why people would do it. They don't want to die. They don't want to get thrown in the fiery furnace. Therefore, in verse 8, at that certain time, Chaldeans came forward and accused the Jews. They spoke to King Nebuchadnezzar and said, O king, live forever. Verse 10, you, O king, have made a decree that everyone who hears it is supposed to fall down and worship. And whoever doesn't worship is supposed to get thrown into the fiery furnace. Verse 12, there are certain Jews who you have set over in affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not paid due regard to you. They do not serve your gods, or worship the golden image which you have set up. Now they call them out. I'm talking about tattletales. I mean, this is straight snitching. They're going out of their way. King, you see this? You see what these people are doing? So the only thing is, they're Hebrews, right? They're Jews. They're not supposed to be worshiping that, but they take a stand. So we're seeing that these three people, they have character. These are young men. We believe that they're around their early 20s, so maybe around 21. It also says that they'd already been promoted. So let's figure out what that means. Let's look in Daniel chapter 2, verses 16 through 18. So it says that, so Daniel went in and asked the king to give him time that he might tell the king the interpretation. Then Daniel went into his house and made the decision known to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, his companions. This is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Verse 18, that they might seek mercies from God of heaven concerning this secret, so that Daniel and his companions might not perish with the rest of the wise men in Babylon. Now, once again, if you don't know this book, you may be like, what is he talking about? In the chapter before, King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream. He had a dream that troubled him. He couldn't understand it. So Nebuchadnezzar had called out the best of the best people, and he did not like that they could not answer him. He wanted the wise men, the Chaldeans, his soothsayers. He wanted all these people to help him understand this dream, but they couldn't do it. So he wanted to kill them all. Now, Daniel said, whoa. Myself and my friends, we're supposed to be the best of the best. And give us some time so we can interpret this dream. Let us go to God. So Daniel does this, and God grants him the ability to understand this dream. So we see in verse 48 and 49 how they respond afterwards. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many great gifts, and he made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon and chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. Verse 49, also Daniel petitioned the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. So we see that these three young men have already been promoted. They've already shown that they have a blessing on them, that the king can trust them. So the king thinks that he can trust them, but then he sees that they're not worshiping this image. now we got a problem. We also see that these three young men have shown that they're serious about pleasing God. If you even look back further in chapter 1, we see that even though they were chosen to be the best of the best, they said that they're not going to eat the things that would defile them. There was things that the king had set before them that they said they're not going to eat. They did not want to go against their Hebrew and Jewish customs. They did not want to dishonor God. And they did a very wise thing. And the king actually thanked them for it. He actually changed everyone else's diet because of what they did. So looking at the past, these three young men have already shown that they're serious about pleasing God. And they've also shown that they're willing to stand up. They're not afraid. And they've even been promoted for it. So the first thing you see is that these young men have character. The second thing we're going to see is their faith in God. So let's keep on going. In Daniel chapter 3. So we see that in verse 13, when Nebuchadnezzar finds out that these three young men didn't bow down, you see in verse 13, Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So they brought these men before the king. In verse 14, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, that you don't serve my gods and worship the gold image that I set up?" Now, to help you understand this isn't a you're either on my side or not on my side. This culture was very polytheistic, which means they believed in many gods. So Nebuchadnezzar wanted to respect Daniel's God. He wanted to respect these gods of other nations he had conquered or taken over. He wanted to respect them. Thank you for, serving your God. Here's an offering, here's that. And Daniel, your God's great. But right now it's time to worship my God. He was polytheistic. That means he believed in many gods. So for him, in the chapter before, he actually praises Daniel's God. He says, whoa, Daniel's God, he worships. He understands. He helps make known dreams. He's like, Daniel can understand dreams because of his God. That God is great. Not that he is the God, but no, that's Daniel's God. So you see that he doesn't believe in there's one most high God. He just says that, that's a good God that you got there. Right now, it's time to worship mine. So we're going to keep on going. So Nebuchadnezzar says that, one, he's very upset. He's furious that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are not worshiping. But then he gives them a second chance. So he says, now, if you're ready at the time you hear this music, go ahead and worship. He said, if you do, good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Ooh, that's a challenge right there. So he says, I'm going to give you a second chance to worship my God, right? I've shown your God respect. Now it's your turn to show my God respect. And he said, and if you don't, say, who's the God that's going to save you from me? That's pretty mean right there. But verse 16, 17, and 18. Oh, this is top notch right here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, "Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that's the case, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from the fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up." Now that is how you stayed up the peer pressure. Now, it's not that they stood up or they gave an attitude. It seems like they gave much respect. They said, "Oh, king," about 2 or 3 times, trying to show respect to him. But they made known that we have faith in God. Not only do we have faith in God that he is the God, but we have faith that he's going to take care of us through this. One of the things that I think that is crazy or insane is that they decide to follow God even if they would die. Let's look back at verse 18. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the gold image which you have set up. He said, but if not. He's like, but if God doesn't deliver us from this, we still won't do it. They're literally saying we're willing to die for our God. They're saying that we are so serious about pleasing God over pleasing you. If God doesn't want to save us through this, we're still choosing him. Now that's faith right there. So, Nebuchadnezzar, verse 19, was full of fury, and the expression on his face changed towards Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He spoke and commanded that the heat on the furnace be turned up 7 times more than it was usually heated. So if you heard this before, even when you were a kid, you know that they get thrown into the fiery furnace. Once they're there, something miraculous happens, and there's someone else in there. There's a 4th person in there, so much that King Nebuchadnezzar is freaked out by it. He goes and he asks his people, whoa, what? I thought we threw 3 people in there. Let's look at this. Verse 25. Look, he answered, I see 4 men, and they're loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they're not hurt. And the form of the 4th is like the Son of God. That is insane right there. Now, we don't know if this is an angel. We don't know if this is a pre-incarnate Jesus. We don't know, but we know who it is, right? Verse 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire. This is the best part right here. Verse 27. And the satraps, administrators, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. All right, so this is the third one, right? This is the third main point, that the young men didn't even smell of smoke. Now, let me break this down. 1, the young men had character. They had character. They had shown they weren't afraid to stand up for their God. They weren't afraid to stand up in front of other people. They were about it. 2, the young men had faith in God. So much that they said, even if we got to die, we're going to stand up for God. 3, they didn't even smell the smoke. That's a next level miracle. It's one thing, they should have died just falling into the furnace. The way that we believe it was built is that you have to walk up this thing, and then the furnace is way down at the bottom. So they shouldn't even survive the fall. So after they fell, he said that where the coals and where you would put, more coals and stuff in, they seen people loose walking around. Well, they were bound. They were strapped together. How can they even be walking around? Well, then even if they are walking around, there's another person there. So there's a miracle on top of miracle on top of miracle. And then when they come out, they have all their clothes and don't even smell of fire. Now, there's a next level slang that my wife and I like to use. We got it from a pastor friend called smelling of smoke. Smelling of smoke means holding on to being sinned against, even though the situation is over. So for me, I had an example, and I always use it, is stepping on my brand new Jordans. So I was in the military and I was away and I got stationed in Japan, and I found these great pair of Michael Jordan basketball shoes online, and I ordered them. They were bright white. It was the first Jordans, all white. Retro. You couldn't find them anywhere else. They were in my size, and I finally got them ordered in. And sure enough, as soon as I wore them, what did somebody do? They stepped on my brand new Jordans. Now that hurt. I took them off, I got them cleaned up, and luckily they didn't scuff. I was able to clean it. You couldn't even tell, right? The only thing is, every time I saw that person, I was smelling the smoke. Just, can't believe that person stepped on my shoe. Didn't you know how much these things cost? Oh, the person makes me so mad, right? I'm smelling the smoke all over the place. The situation was already done. The person apologized. There's not even any evidence that anything happened, but I was holding on to it. I was smelling a smoke. And I think one of the things that's really cool is that not only did the Hebrew boys not smell of smoke, but they gave God the glory, or God got the glory out of it. Now, on the flip side, when us humans, young Josh Trotter, when I smell of smoke, I'm placing the focus back on me instead of focus on God. So, and that's in everything in life. After we get into an argument, when we hold on to it, even though it's done, we're smelling of smoke. How about the time where something happened at work? The situation could be over, but when you see that person, you still get that attitude. That's smelling of smoke. God is working miracles right now. We do not need to be holding on to something and not giving God the glory. So the last thing is that when we choose not to smell the smoke, we get the reward, but God gets the glory. If we keep looking on, we see in verse 28, Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies that they should not serve or worship any God except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. They get the reward, but God got the glory. That's what it's supposed to be like when we choose God over man. So let's get into some more application and we get out of here. So number one, what does your character say about you? Now for real, think about it. We see what the character was for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They stood up for God. They weren't afraid to put their faith on display. And they even said, even if our bodies are going to be burnt, we're still going to serve God. That's character. What does your character say about you? 2, who do you care more about pleasing? Now, sometimes we think of just God versus man, or God versus our boss, or God versus our wife, or God versus our husband. But what about God versus you? Your desires and what you want. Who do you care more about pleasing? We learn from this example who it should be. The third one is, how do you handle resolutions? Think about it. These guys came out, didn't even smell of smoke. They ended up getting promoted out of it, and God had got the glory. But what if they handled things the way Joshua Trotter handled things? What if they got an attitude like, "Yo, we tried to tell you, King, why'd you throw us in there? We didn't do anything wrong." They could have had an attitude. They could have made a big stir. They could have fought in war and tried to cause a rebellion. But instead, they were humble, got the reward, and God got the glory. So think, how do you handle resolutions? Do you smell the smoke? Do you let situations go after they've been done? Or do you still hold on to it? So in conclusion, I pray that none of us ever have to go through what Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had to go through. I want us all to put our faith on display, but not to be on the point where we're going to have to be burnt to show our faith in God. I think that I love my daughter. If she was ever in a situation, I would want her to just do a little fake bow to the statue and get on back home. We know you don't really worship that. Just come back home healthy. But that's amazing that they were able to do that. They were able to stand firm on something that, honestly, many of us would just do a little fake little bow and keep it moving. So let us all work on pleasing God over pleasing man and develop the kind of character that God will get the glory. We might get a reward, but it's all about him getting the glory. Thanks, y'all.